Hello. So this is Saturday day one. What I'm gonna be doing for the next 4 weeks at least is to practice speech therapy so that I would articulate better and stop mumbling and be able to communicate better and yeah, most importantly, build confidence because I feel very insecure if insecure about whether the other person understands me or not, especially because of my second language and I do have accent as well, so that's stopping me from talking to people. I got better at using body language, but yeah, I wanna improve it better because yeah, it was dismal when I was talking with Calvin. It's definitely like the fact that um, I was having an alcohol and I have a little allergic reaction to alcohol and my nasal congestion goes bad, so it makes it harder to practice. And I think when I'm articulating, my pronunciation gets worse because I'm not practicing it. Well, I'm not focusing on speaking better, so that's double bad. So what I'm gonna be doing is every Saturday I'll be reading out the text loud uh, to see the improvement with the practice. So I'll be practicing maybe 5 to 10 minutes a day. Uh, I'll say I'll try to do 10 to practice those voice therapist, uh, voice therapist suggestions such as tongue twisting or um, those fast verse like tic tac toe or because like my problem is yes pronunciation but the worst is mumbling, so it's like KKMWRS. Those are the worst issue, and if I can nail that, and then I can get away with a lot of my pronunciation issues. So yeah, here it is. So I'm gonna be choosing this Beyond Good and Evil, and maybe from this another favorite text, Zen Mind and Beginner's Mind. So it's a good way for me to review the book as well. So I'm gonna be choosing this chapter, chapter 6, What is Noble. It could be true that the more I read the same text passage, I get improvement anyway. But let's just focus on the pronunciation. So I try to speak out loud like this too in the beginning to see if there's any improvement in general as well. So let's compare. So yeah, I noticed like measurement is a big crucial part of uh, trying like motivating myself as well as changing the strategy, what and deciding what's working and what not. So it's go ahead. Let's get going. So okay, every elevation of the type man has hitherto been the work of an aristocratic society, and so it will always be a society believing in a long scale of gradation of rank and differences of worth among human beings, and requiring slavery in some form or other, without the pathos of distance, such as grows out of the incarnated differences of classes, out of the constant outlooking and downlooking of the ruling caste on subordinates and instruments, and out of their equally constant practice of obeying and commanding, of keeping down and keeping at the distance that other more mysterious pathos could never have arisen, the longing for an ever new widening of distance within the soul itself, the formation of ever higher, rarer, farther, more extended, more comprehensive states. In short, just the elevation of the type man, the continued self-surmounting of man to use a moral formula in a supermoral sense to be sure, one must not resign oneself to any humanitarian illusions about the history of the origin of our aristocratic society. That is to say, the preliminary condition for the elevation of the type man. The truth is hard. Let us acknowledge unprejudicedly how every higher civilization hitherto has originated. Man with a still natural nature, barbarians in every terrible sense of the word, man of prey, still in possession of unbroken strength of will and desire for power, threw themselves upon weaker, more moral, more peaceful race, perhaps trading or cattle rearing communities, or upon old mellow civilizations in which the final vital force was flickering out in brilliant fireworks of wit and depravity. At the commencement, the noble caste was always the barbarian caste. Their superiority did not consist first of all in their physical, but in their physical, psych, psych, psychical, I'm not sure about this word, how to pronounce it, psychical power. They were more complete man, which at every point also implies the same as more complete beast. Corruption as the indication that anarchy threatens to break out among the instincts and that the foundation of the emotions called life is conversed is something radically different according to the organization in which it manifests itself. When, for instance, an aristocracy like that of France at the beginning of the revolution flung away its privileges with sublime disgust and sacrificed itself to the excess of its moral sentiments, it was corruption. It was really only the closing act of the corruption which had existed for centuries, by virtue of which that aristocracy had abdicated step by step its lordly prerogative, pro, pre, prerogatives and lowered itself to a function of royalty. In the end, even to its decoration and parade dress. The essential thing, however, in a good and healthy aristocracy is that it should not regard itself as a function either of the kingship or the commonwealth, but as the significance and highest justification thereof. That it should therefore accept with good conscience the sacrifice of a legion of individuals who for its sake must be suppressed and reduced to imperfect man to slaves and instruments. Its fundamental belief must be precisely that society is not allowed to exist for its own sake, but only as a foundation and scaffolding by means of which a select class of beings may be able to elevate themselves to their higher duties, in general to a higher existence, like those sun-seeking climbing plants in Java. They're called Sipal Matador, which encircle an oak so long and so often with their arms, until at last, high above it, but supported by it, they can unfold their tops in the open light and exhibit their happiness. To refrain mutually from injury, from violence, from exploitation, and put one's will on a par with that of others. This may result in a certain rough sense in good conduct among individuals when the necessary conditions are given, namely the actual similarity of the individuals in amount of force and degree of worth, and their correlation within one organization. As soon However, as one wished to take this principle more generally, and if possible, even as a fundamental principle of society, it will immediately disclose what it really is, namely a will to the denial of life, a principle of dissolution and decay. Here, one must think profoundly to the very basis and resist all sentimental weakness. Life itself is essentially appropriation, injury, conquest of the strange and weak, suppression, severity, obs- obtrusion of peculiar forms, incorporation, and at the least, putting in the mildest exploitation. But why should one forever use precisely these words on which for ages a disparaging purpose has been stamped? Even the organization within which, as was previously suppressed, the individuals treat each other as equal, it takes place in every healthy aristocracy, must itself, if it be a living and not a dying organization, do all that towards other bodies which the individuals within it refrain from doing to each other. It will have to be the incarnated will to power. It will endeavor to grow, to gain ground, attract to itself, and acquire ascendancy, not owning to any morality or immorality, but because it lives and because life is precisely will to power. On no point, however, is the ordinary consciousness of Europeans more unwilling to be corrected than on this matter. People now rave everywhere, even under the guise of science, about coming conditions of society in which the exploiting character is to be absent. That sounds to be that sounds to my ears as if they promised to invent a mode of life which should refrain from all organic functions. Exploitation does not belong to a depraved or imperfect and primitive society. It belongs to the nature of the living being as a primary organic function. It is a consequence of the intrinsic will to power, which is precisely the will to life. Granting that as a theory, this is a novelty. As a reality, it is the fundamental fact of all history. Let us be so far honest towards ourselves. Towards ourselves. Okay, that was three chapters, three paragraphs. There's one more I want to read, but it's kind of long, 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 and I'm not sure if I should get into that or not. And like I only read three chapters, and my mouth is already tired. So it seems like yeah, my tongue. I do have lazy mouth that I can't keep talking that long, and it's really tiring. Um, I'll read one verse from Zen Mind as well, just to give a diversity in the type of writings that I'm gonna read. Yeah, so mistakes in practice. It is when you practice is rather greedy that you become discouraged with it. So you should be grateful that you have a sign or warning sign to show you the weak point in your practice. There are several core ways of practice that you should understand. Usually, when you practice the Zen, you become very idealistic and you set up an ideal or goal which you strive to attain and fulfill. But as I have often said, this is absurd. When you are idealistic, you have some gaining idea within yourself. By the time you attain your ideal or goal, your gaining idea will create another ideal. So as long as your practice is based on gaining idea and you practice Zazen in an idealistic way, you will have no time actually to attain your ideal. Moreover, you will be sacrificing the meat of your practice. Because your attainment is always ahead, you will always be sacrificing yourself now for some ideal in the future. You end up with nothing. This is absurd. It is not adequate practice at all. But even worse than this idealistic attitude is to practice Zazen in competition with someone else. This is a poor, shabby kind of practice. Our Soto way puts an emphasis on shikantaza, or just sitting. Actually, we do have any particular name. We do not have any particular name for our practice. When we practice Zazen, we just practice it. And whether we find joy in our practice or not, we just do it. Even though we are sleepy, we are tired of practicing Zazen, or of repeating the same thing day after day, even so we continue our practice. Whether or not someone else encourages our practice, we just do it. Even when you practice Zazen alone without a teacher, I think you will find some way to tell whether your practice is adequate or not. When you are tired of sitting or when you are disgusted with your practice, you should recognize this is a warning signal. You become discouraged with your practice when you practice as being idealistic. You have some gaining idea in your practice and it's not pure enough. It is when your practice is rather greedy that you become discouraged with it. So you should be grateful that you have a sign or warning signal to show you that the weak point in your practice. At that time, forgetting all about your mistake and renewing your way, you can resume your original practice. This is a very important point. So as long as you continue your practice, you are quite safe. But as it is very difficult to continue, you must find some way to encourage yourself. As it is hard to encourage yourself without becoming involved in some poor kind of practice. To continue our pure practice by yourself may be rather difficult. This is why we have a teacher. With your teacher, you will correct your practice. Of course, you will have a very hard time with him, but even so, you will always be safe from wrong practice. Most Zen Buddhist priests have had a difficult time with their masters. When they talk about the difficulties, you may think that without this kind of hardship, you cannot practice Zazen, but this is not true. Whether you have difficulties in your practice or not, as long as you continue it, you have pure practice in its true sense. Even when you are not aware of it, you have it. So Dogen Zenji said, do not think you will necessarily be aware of your own enlightenment. Whether or not you are aware of it, you'll have your own true enlightenment within your practice. Another mistake will be to practice for the sake of the joy you will find in it. Actually, when you practice it is involved in the feeling of joy. It is not in very good shape either. Of course, this is not poor practice, but compared to the true practice, it is not so good. In Hinayana Buddhism, practice is classified in 4 ways. The best way is just to do it without having any joy in it, not even spiritual joy. This way is just to do it, forgetting your physical and mental feeling, forgetting all about yourself in your practice. This is the 4th stage, or the highest stage. The next highest stage is to have just physical joy in your practice. At this stage, you find some pleasure in practice and you will practice because of the pleasure you find in it. In the second stage, you have both mental and physical joy or a good feeling. These two middle stages are stages in which you practice doesn't because you feel good in your practice. The first stage is when you have no thinking and no curiosity in your practice. These four stages also apply to our Mahayana practice, and the highest is just to practice it, practice it. If you find some difficulty in your practice, that is the warning that you have some wrong idea, so you have to be careful. But do not give up your practice. Continue it, knowing your weakness. Here there is no gaining idea. Here there is no fixed idea of attainment. You do not say this is enlightenment or that is not right practice. Even in wrong practice, when you realize it and continue, there is right practice. Our practice cannot be perfect, but without being discouraged by this, we should continue it. That's the secret of practice. And if you want to find some encouragement in your discouragement, getting tired of practice is itself the encouragement. Encourage yourself when you get tired of it. When you do not want to do it, that is a warning sign, warning signal. It is like having a toothache when your teeth are not so good. When you feel some good pain in your teeth, you go to the dentist. That is our way. That is our way. Our way. Our way. The cause of conflict. The cause of conflict is some fixed idea or one-sided idea. When everyone knows the value of pure practice, we will have little conflict in our world. This is the secret of our practice and Dogen Zenji's way. Dogen repeats this point in his book, Shobogenzo, a treasury of the true Dharma. If you understand the cause of conflict as some fixed or one-sided idea, you can find meaning in various practice without being caught by any of them. If you do not realize this point, you will be easily caught by some particular way, and you will say, "This is enlightenment. This is a perfect practice. This is our way. The rest of the ways are not perfect. This is the best way." This is the big mistake. There is no particular way in true practice. You should find your own way, and you should know what kind of practice you have right now, knowing both the advantages and disadvantages of some special practice. You can practice that special way without danger, but if you have a one-sided attitude, you will ignore the disadvantage of the practice, emphasizing only its good part. Eventually, you will discover the worst side of the practice and become discouraged when it is too late. This is silly. We should be grateful that the ancient teachers point out that mistake. Okay, that was a long couple of pages from Zen Mind. It's definitely easier to speak. It's more verbal. I guess it's easier. It's more child friendly. Is that a good way to say it? It's more lower in the grade level requirement. I'm getting tired, man. My mind is getting sloppy. Yes. Practice without trying to gain something. Is it? It sounds like those Japanese mantra about hard-working salaryman who's not thinking. Daigo criticizes that a lot. But there must be some truth to it. Like he practiced mindlessly about book. I guess especially in the beginning, or in the middle ground, where you're not an expert but not really a complete beginner. You feel like you know a lot more, so you stop it, and you never get better, like really get better. So that's like a danger that you can fall in pitfall against. Yeah, so yeah, there's some truth to it, and that's how I got better at dancing, and that's where I got to be where it is now. So, but I do want the results, so that needs more strategy, like a result, like winning a competition or getting better at something. yeah, that needs actual thinking, and that gives more reward return in your real life than not. And I do want more rewards right now. Yeah, that's life. Yeah, it's not all about Thursday. I want to read one more of that long verse. I think it's called verse instead of paragraphs. It's from Beyond Good and Evil. So the next one, I think it's a really good passage. I hope the battery doesn't run out. Okay, so in a tour through the many finer and coarser moralities which have hitherto prevailed or still prevail on the earth, I found certain traits recurring regularly together and connected with one another, until finally two primary types revealed themselves to me, and the radical distinction was brought to light. There is master morality and slave morality. I would at once add, however, that in all higher and mixed civilizations, there are also attempts at the reconciliation of the two moralities, but one finds still oftener the confusion and mutual misunderstandings of them. Indeed, sometimes their close juxtapositions, even in the same man within one soul. The distinctions of moral values have either originated in a ruling caste, pleasantly conscious of being different from the ruled, or among the ruled class, the slaves and dependents of all sorts. In the first case, when it is the rulers who determine the conception good, it is the exalted, proud disposition which is regarded as the distinguishing feature, and that which determines the order of rank. The noble type of man separates from himself the beings in whom the opposite of this exalted, proud disposition displays itself. He despises them. Let it at once be noted that in this first kind of morality, the antithesis good and bad means practically the same as noble and despicable. The antithesis good and evil is of a different origin. The cowardly, the timid, the insignificant, and those thinking merely of narrow utility are despised. Moreover, also the distrustful with their constrained glances, the self-abasing, the dog-like kind of men who let themselves be abused, the mendicant flatterers, and above all the liars. It is a fundamental belief of all aristocrats that the common people are untruthful. With truthful ones, the nobility in ancient Greece called themselves. It is obvious that everywhere the designation of moral values were at first applied to man and were only derivatively, and at a later period applied to actions. It is a gross mistake, therefore, when historians of morals starts with questions like why have sympathetic actions been praised? The noble type of man regards himself as a determiner of values. He does not require to be approved of. He passes the judgment. What is injurious to me is injurious in itself. He knows that it is he himself only who confers honor on things. He is the creator of values. He honors whatever he recognizes in himself. Such morality equals self-glorification. In the foreground, there is the feeling of plenitude of power, which seeks to overflow the happiness of high tension, the consciousness of wealth, which would fain give and bestow, The noble man also helps the unfortunate, but not or scarcely out of pity, but rather from the impulse generated by the superabundance of power. Power. The noble man honors in himself the powerful one, him also who has power over himself, who knows how to speak and how to keep silence, who takes pleasure in subjecting himself to severity and hardness, and has reverence for all that is severe and hard. Wotan placed the hard heart in my breast, says an old Scandinavian saga. It is thus rightly expressed from the soul of the proud Viking. Such a type of man is even proud of not being made for sympathy. The hero of the saga, therefore, adds warningly, he who has not a hard heart when young will never have one. The noble and brave who think thus are the farthest removed from the morality which sees precisely in sympathy or in acting for the good of others or in disinterestment. The characteristic of the moral, faith in oneself, pride in oneself, a radical enmity and irony towards selflessness belong as definitely to noble morality as do a careless, careless scorn and precaution in presence of sympathy and a warm heart. It is the powerful who know how to honor. It is their art, their domain for invention. The profound reverence for age and for tradition, all lore rests on this double reverence. The belief and prejudice in favor of ancestors and unfavorable to newcomers is typical in the morality of the powerful, and and if reversely, men of modern ideas believe almost instinctively in progress and the future, and are more and more lacking in respect for old age. The ignoble origin of these ideas has complacently betrayed itself thereby. A morality of the ruling class, however, is more especially foreign and irritating to present-day taste in the sternness of its principle that one has duties only to one's equals, that one may act towards being of a lower rank, towards all that is foreign, just as seems good to one, or as the heart desires, and in any case beyond good and evil. It is here and sympathy and similar sentiments can have a place. The ability and obligation to exercise prolonged gratitude and prolonged revenge, both only within the circles of equals, artfulness in retaliation, refinement of the idea in friendship, a certain necessity to have enemies as outlets for the emotions of envy, quarrelsomeness, arrogance, in fact, in order to be a good friend. All these are typical characteristic of the noble morality, which, as has been pointed out, is not the morality of modern ideas, and is therefore at present difficult to realize and also to unearth and disclose. It is otherwise with the second type of morality, slave morality, supposing that the abused, the oppressed, the suffering, the emancipated, the weary, and those uncertain of themselves should moralize. What will be the common element in their moral estimates? Probably a pessimistic suspicion with regard to the entire situation of man, will find expressions, perhaps a condemnation of man together with his situation. The slave has an unfavorable eye for the virtue of the powerful. He has a skepticism and distrust, a refinement of distrust of everything good that is there honored, that is there honored, he would fain persuade himself that the very happiness there is not genuine. On the other hand, those qualities which serve to alleviate the existence of sufferers are brought into prominence and flooded with light. It is here that sympathy, the kind and helping hand, the warm heart, patience, diligence, humility, and friendliness attain to honor. For here, these are the most useful qualities and almost the only means of supporting the burden of existence. Slave morality is essentially the morality of utility. Here is the seed of the original famous antithesis good and evil. Evil, power, and dangerousness are assumed to reside in the evil, and certain dreadfulness, subtlety, and strength, which do not admit of being despised. According to slave morality, therefore, the evil man arouses fear. According to master morality, it is precisely the good man who arouses fear and seeks to arouse it, while the bad man is regarded as a despicable being. The contrast attains its maximum when, in accordance with the logical consequences of slave morality, a shade of depreciation. It may be slight and well-intentioned, at last attaches itself to the good man of this morality, because according to the servile mode of thought, the good man must in any case be the safe man. He is good-natured, easily deceived, perhaps a little stupid. Everywhere the slave morality gains the ascendancy, language shows a tendency to approximate the significations of the words good and stupid. A last fundamental difference, the desire for freedom, the instinct for happiness, and the refinements of the feeling of liberty belong as necessarily to slave morality, as necessarily to slave morals and morality as artifice and enthusiasm in reverence and devotion are the regular symptoms of an aristocratic mode of thinking and estimating. Hence, we can understand without further detail why love as a passion, it is our European specialty, must absolutely be of noble origin. As is well known, its invention is due to the Provencal poet cavaliers, those brilliant, ingenious men of the Guy Sabre, to whom Europe owes so much and almost owes itself. Alright, so that was slave morality. That was a good one. I quite like it. I think it's an interesting way to think about the world that's not talked about in a lot of media outlets, especially New York Times. Well, most it's not about left or right. Most journalism or most media outlets feel into this kind of like slave morality, like you're not happy because of this. Same as like a cheap sales tactics too. So it's not about like media versus, or like it's not about socialism or intellectual versus capitalism. Capitalism plays on this a lot too. It works, like, Black Friday, and they put up a lot of sales and try to invoke buying behavior from people who wouldn't necessarily buy, but they get this a little bit of instant gratification. People who have no self-control and they don't have a desire to create something. They don't buy it to create something. They just buy for the sake of buying to feel better about themselves. But I think on the entrepreneur side, that they have more of this, like, well, a lot of entrepreneurs are fake. They just want to make money and not, but they do desire the freedom, and they need to be creating stuff. That's the actual Superman thinking. It's a Nietzsche's thinking about people who have desire for nobility, artistic passion, love. You need that, and I think the society needs this kind of people to keep moving forward. At least in the developed countries, and these like slaves, they don't realize they are in a really bad, you know, bad shithole till like 20 years later. So like maybe the country gets, corrupted, and like Japan, like they get indulged in this like short-term gratification, and they never invested into the futures. They don't have that passion for creation anymore. So they got overthrown by slaves, that baby boomer slaves who are in the age between, I'll say like 50 to 80 now. They definitely ruined it. So yeah, they're gonna be in a really bad shape for the next 30 years or 50 years. But yeah, that's what it is anyway. So yeah, how's my speaking practice? It's been 41 minutes, pretty long. I was thinking it would only take 10 minutes or 20, but it's good. I don't know, at least it's a good practice for my mouth, and I don't talk that long. Uh, Usually, I don't have a chance to speak that much. I work on my own too. So and I don't know. Maybe it's a good book, so I feel much more articulate with my mind. So it's a good practice, not just for practicing the speech, not just for voice, but also for articulation. Yeah, I could try. I could bump up the practice and make it into like 20 minutes a day, maybe, if I'm serious. Yeah, if I want to see the actual improvement, maybe I should increase the amount of practice. Anyway, my phone might die. Yeah, it's good. The new phone is lasting quite long. It has double the data storage size. Anyway, so that's it. So okay, so see you. Bye. Today's November 27th. Okay, so Saturday, about 9. Okay, bye.